Your thumb moves before you decide anything. A few seconds of stillness, a red light, a pause in a conversation that just ended. And without any real thought, your hand drifts towards your pocket. You tell yourself you're checking something important. You're not. You're trying to make an uncomfortable feeling disappear. That feeling has a name: boredom. And you've spent years treating it like a malfunction, a glitch that needs fixing the second it appears. But the real answer is far stranger. Boredom isn't a malfunction. It's a message. And the brain sending it is doing something far more deliberate than you've ever given it credit for. Think about how strange that is, once you actually slow down and look at it. Almost every other uncomfortable feeling you experience points to something specific. Hunger points to food. Thirst points to water. Pain points to an injury. Boredom points to nothing. There's no object for it. No obvious cause sitting in front of you. Just a vague, gnawing pressure that something needs to change. That vagueness is exactly why it's so easy to misdiagnose. You feel restless, so you assume the world around you is the problem. The room is too quiet. The line is too slow. The meeting is too long. So you go looking outside yourself for a fix, when the entire signal was generated inside your own skull in the first place. Here's what's actually happening in your head the moment nothing is happening around you. When external stimulation drops away, your brain doesn't go quiet. It switches networks. Neuroscientist Marcus Reichel at Washington University identified this switch in the early 2000s and called it the default mode network. It's a set of brain regions that activate not when you're focused on a task, but when you're not focused on anything at all. Think about that for a second. Your brain has a dedicated system that only turns on when you stop paying attention to the outside world. Why would evolution build that? Because an unoccupied mind isn't an idle one. It's a mind quietly running simulations, replaying memories, testing future scenarios, stitching together ideas that have no business being near each other until your default mode network drags them into the same room. Brain imaging studies built on Reichel's original findings show this network lighting up during daydreaming, during mind-wandering, during exactly the kind of unstructured drifting you feel guilty about. It consumes a striking amount of metabolic energy for something with no obvious task attached to it. A brain that's supposedly doing nothing is, in measurable terms, working. This is the part almost nobody tells you about boredom. It isn't dead time. It's maintenance time. And your brain has been doing this kind of maintenance since long before you had a phone to interrupt it. Psychologist Sandy Mann at the University of Central Lancashire wanted to know if this maintenance actually produced anything useful, so she ran a deceptively simple experiment. She had one group of participants copy numbers out of a phone book for several minutes, about as boring as a task can get. Then she gave both that group and a control group a creative task, asking them to come up with as many uses as possible for a plastic cup. The bored group didn't just match the control group. They beat them. Their answers were more numerous and more original. Mann's conclusion reframed the entire emotion. Boredom, she argued, doesn't shut creativity down. It's the ignition switch for it. Your brain, starved of external input, starts manufacturing its own. In a follow-up study, Mann pushed the idea even further. She compared a passively boring task to an actively boring one, then tested creativity again afterward. The more passive the boredom, the freer the mind seemed to wander, and the more original the ideas that followed. The takeaway wasn't subtle. The dullest possible activity, copying numbers with nothing else to occupy your attention, outperformed almost any stimulating alternative when it came to setting up the brain for a creative leap. Notice something else happening underneath that experiment, though. Boredom didn't feel good to those participants while they were copying numbers. It felt restless, itchy, almost unbearable. And that discomfort isn't a side effect. It's the entire mechanism. Psychologist John Eastwood at York University spent years studying why boredom feels the way it does, and his research points to something specific. Boredom is what happens when your brain wants to be engaged with something meaningful but can't find anything to latch onto. It's not a lack of stimulation. It's a mismatch between the engagement you crave and the engagement available to you. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. You can be bored while surrounded by entertainment, scrolling through dozens of videos without absorbing a single one because none of it actually engages your attention in a way that feels meaningful, and you can sit in total silence with nothing happening at all and not feel bored for a second because your mind has latched onto something it finds genuinely worth chewing on. Eastwood's work suggests boredom was never really about how much is happening around you. It's about whether your attention has found anything worth attaching itself to. That mismatch is uncomfortable on purpose. Discomfort moves you. It's the same mechanism behind hunger, behind thirst, behind the itch on your arm you can't ignore. Boredom is your brain's version of an empty fuel gauge. It exists specifically to make you go looking for something better. So what do you do the instant that gauge hits empty? You reach for your phone. And here's where the story turns counterintuitive. A phone doesn't satisfy the hunger boredom creates. It just mutes the alarm. Scrolling gives your brain a stream of tiny, disconnected rewards, fast enough and frequent enough that the default mode network never gets the long, uninterrupted stretch of silence it actually needs to do its quiet stitching work. You feel less bored. But you haven't resolved anything. You've just turned off the smoke detector while the fire keeps smoldering underneath. Consider what each of those rewards actually is. A notification, a like, a new video starting before the last one even finishes. None of it requires your default mode network to do anything except stay quiet and wait its turn. The irony is almost cruel. The device built to relieve boredom is, mechanically speaking, the most efficient tool ever invented for preventing the exact mental process boredom was trying to trigger. Manoush Zomorodi tested this directly with a project called Bored and Brilliant, asking thousands of participants to track and reduce their phone use specifically during moments of boredom. The pattern that came back again and again was the same one Sandy Mann had already found in the lab. People who let themselves stay bored, even briefly, reported clearer thinking and more original ideas than people who filled every blank second with a screen. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Some of the most significant ideas in modern history weren't produced at a desk under deadline pressure. They showed up during walks, during showers, during long train rides. So here's the question worth sitting with. What has your brain been quietly trying to build in all those moments you never gave it the chance to finish? You don't need hours of silence to find out. Eastwood's research and Mann's experiments both point to the same modest starting point. A few unfilled minutes, a walk without headphones, a line at the store where your hand stays in your pocket instead of pulling the phone out of it. That's enough for the default mode network to start its work, and often enough for an idea to surface that a fully stimulated brain would never have produced. It won't feel productive while it's happening. That's the part that trips most people up. Sitting with boredom feels like wasting time, precisely because nothing observable is happening on the surface. But the entire point of this video has been to show you that the surface was never where the work was taking place. The work is happening underneath, in a network that only switches on when you finally stop feeding it something else to chew on. Boredom was never the enemy. It was the signal that your mind had run out of input and was ready to start generating its own. The species that built tools, told stories, and asked questions no one had answered yet didn't do it by staying stimulated every second of the day. It did it in the gaps. The quiet, uncomfortable, seemingly useless gaps that you've been trained to erase the instant they appear. So the next time your thumb starts drifting towards your pocket for no real reason at all, pause for just a moment before it gets there. That restless, itchy feeling isn't something to escape. It's your brain finally getting the quiet it's been waiting for. Thanks for hanging out today. Hit that subscribe button if you want more step-by-step guides on the hidden science, bizarre physics, and secret psychology driving your everyday life. Catch you in the next one.